Formula One in 1978 was a championship defined by technical upheaval and rapidly escalating engineering ambition. In just a few years, designers had moved from relatively simple aerofoils to full ground effect aerodynamics, and the result was the Lotus 79, a car so effective in corners that it seemed to bend the laws of physics. Brabham, run by team owner Bernie Ecclestone and led technically by Gordon Murray, found itself under pressure to respond. Their base car for that year, the Brabham BT46, was powered by a naturally aspirated 3-litre Alfa Romeo flat 12 engine. This engine produced competitive power, around 520 to 525 brake horsepower at roughly 12,000 RPM, but it was bulky and wide. The large flat 12 left little space to carve the deep venturi tunnels under the floor that were essential to the Lotus concept. Murray had already attempted to compensate by experimenting with side panel heat exchangers rather than conventional radiators in order to reduce frontal drag and free space for aerodynamic shaping, but those surface coolers could not dissipate enough heat in race conditions. The Alfa engine routinely overheated, and the team was forced to revert to more orthodox front radiators, sacrificing some of the aerodynamic efficiency that might have closed the gap to Lotus. Brabham therefore faced a difficult equation. They needed a radical way to create massive downforce without the venturi tunnels that everyone else was exploiting, and they needed it quickly if they were to remain competitive. The solution Murray conceived was at once brilliant, audacious, and controversial. If he could not accelerate airflow under the car using purely road speed venturis, why not mechanically extract it instead? He proposed fitting a large engine-driven fan at the back of the car. Officially, its purpose would be to improve cooling, still a real issue with the flat 12. But if designed carefully, it could also suck air out from beneath the chassis. By lowering air pressure under the floor and sealing the sides with skirts, the car could generate enormous downforce at any speed where the engine revs were high enough to drive the fan. Because the FIA's rules at the time banned movable aerodynamic devices, except when their primary purpose was not aerodynamic, a fan that was primarily for cooling could, in theory, pass scrutineering. This insight opened the door for the Brabham BT46B, which would soon earn the nickname fan car. Technically, the BT46B was a sophisticated reworking of the existing BT46 chassis. It retained the aluminium monocoque and the Alfa Romeo flat 12 but featured a completely re-engineered underbody. The entire engine bay was sealed so that the fan could draw air effectively from beneath the car. Sliding skirts ran along the floor edges to maintain a tight seal with the track surface, a technique Lotus had refined to perfection. A large horizontally mounted radiator sat above the engine so that air pulled by the fan would also pass through it, providing the essential cooling justification. The fan itself, roughly half a meter in diameter, was driven from the gearbox via a system of clutches so that gear changes would not disrupt its speed. At high engine RPM, the fan could spin at astonishing rates, creating a pressure differential that effectively glued the car to the asphalt. About 30 horsepower of engine output was consumed by the fan drive, but the additional downforce more than compensated. Contemporary accounts suggest that at racing speed, the BT46B could develop hundreds of kilograms of extra downforce compared with a conventional ground effect car, particularly valuable in medium-speed corners where road speed airflow alone would normally limit downforce. Driving the BT46B required a different style, because suction depended on engine speed rather than road speed. A driver lifting off the throttle through a corner would see fan RPM drop and downforce diminish. Niki Lauda later explained that you had to keep the revs high through the entry and mid-corner phases to maintain the grip, something that initially felt counterintuitive but produced extraordinary cornering stability when mastered. The car was equipped with a small pressure gauge on the dashboard so the driver could monitor the underfloor vacuum and detect skirt leaks or fan malfunctions. Early testing revealed new engineering challenges. The original fan blades of reinforced plastic proved too weak, so stronger magnesium blades were fitted. Skirt materials and mounting systems were refined so they could withstand continuous contact with the track without excessive wear. In many ways, the BT46B was as much a prototype in sealing technology as it was an aero experiment, demanding precise assembly and constant monitoring. Brabham unveiled the fan car in secrecy. During transport and early practice sessions, mechanics famously covered the fan housing with a dustbin lid to hide its true purpose. But the advantage could not remain hidden for long. The BT46B's sole World Championship appearance came at the 1978 Swedish Grand Prix at Anderstorp. In qualifying, Lauda and his teammate John Watson put their cars second and third on the grid behind Mario Andretti's Lotus 79, but those positions did not reveal the whole story. Observers noted how the Brabham seemed unfazed by the circuit's long, sweeping bends and how they squatted perceptibly under acceleration, visual proof of the suction at work. In the race itself, Watson spun off after about 20 laps, but Lauda demonstrated the car's full potential. On a surface made slippery by oil dropped from another competitor, Lauda passed Andretti with apparent ease and then pulled away relentlessly. He crossed the line more than half a minute ahead of second-placed Riccardo Patrese, a margin of victory that in the intensely competitive world of late 70s Formula One was staggering. The BT46B had proved not just competitive but dominant. The paddock reaction was immediate and intense. Rival teams lodged protests, arguing that the car violated the ban on movable aerodynamic devices. Brabham's defense rested on the rule's wording. A movable device was permitted if its primary purpose was not aerodynamic. The team had indeed designed the fan to contribute to engine cooling, routing hot air from the top-mounted radiator, and could demonstrate that a majority of the air it displaced did pass through cooling elements. The race stewards and the sport's governing body, the Commission Sportive Internationale, accepted this reasoning and allowed the Swedish Grand Prix result to stand. Yet, legality on paper did not mean political acceptability. Colin Chapman of Lotus and other rival constructors warned that if the fan car were allowed to race again, they would have no choice but to build similar machines, leading to an expensive and potentially hazardous escalation of suction technology. The political pressure on Bernie Ecclestone, who as both Brabham boss and influential figure within the Formula One Constructors Association was deeply involved in the sport's governance, quickly became overwhelming. Although the CSI did not formally outlaw the car immediately, Brabham voluntarily withdrew the BT46B from further championship events. The two chassis built in B specification were converted back to the conventional BT46 layout for the remainder of the season. The fan car remained perfectly legal in theory, but it never raced again. In subsequent months, the rulebook was tightened to remove any ambiguity, closing the loophole that Murray had so cleverly exploited. In the record books, the BT46B stands as a car with a perfect one-race career. One start, one win. The influence of the Brabham fan car, however, extended far beyond that single Sunday in Sweden. Its success forced the sport to confront how far creative interpretation of regulations could go. It highlighted the tension between the letter of the rules and their intended spirit, a debate that continues in Formula One today whenever a team introduces a controversial innovation. Technically, the BT46B showed that downforce need not be tied purely to vehicle speed and external airflow. By mechanically extracting air from beneath the car, engineers could, in theory, generate grip at will. This concept has echoed through later experiments in active aerodynamics, from movable wings to the blown diffusers of the 2010 S, and even to Gordon Murray's own road car projects decades later, such as the T.50, which uses a rear-mounted fan to help manage underbody airflow. The car also deepened the conversation about driver skill and safety. Lauda described the immense cornering forces as unlike anything he had felt before, noting that the grip disappeared suddenly if engine revs dropped too far. The need to maintain throttle through a corner demanded both courage and precision, and it hinted at potential dangers if a mechanical failure caused the fan to slow abruptly. These concerns reinforced calls for stricter oversight of movable devices and influenced the subsequent evolution of ground effect regulations. In the broader narrative of motorsport, the BT46B sits alongside earlier and later outliers, like the Chaparral 2J in Can-Am racing, which also used fans for suction, and the Lotus 88 with its twin chassis concept. Each of these designs forced regulators to decide whether ingenuity or competitive balance should prevail. Seen in hindsight, the Brabham BT46B encapsulates Formula One's unique mixture of technical brilliance, competitive opportunism, and political negotiation. Gordon Murray solved a real engineering constraint, the inability to package deep Venturi tunnels around a flat 12 engine. By reimagining how downforce could be produced, Bernie Ecclestone balanced the immediate competitive gain against the longer-term politics of keeping rival teams on side. Niki Lauda, a triple world champion known for his methodical approach, mastered a completely different style of driving to exploit the machine's extraordinary grip. All three were operating at the limits of their respective crafts. Today, more than 4 decades later, the BT46B is still cited whenever Formula One debates radical technologies, from active suspension to 2026's proposed active-aero systems. It remains a powerful reminder that in Formula One the gap between genius and illegality can be as thin as a line in the rulebook, and that a single race can leave a legacy lasting generations. The car that won only once changed how engineers, teams and regulators think about innovation. It demonstrated that mechanical suction could rival or surpass aerodynamic ventures, and it proved that exploiting a grey area can sometimes yield not just a competitive advantage, but a permanent place in motorsport history.